Welcome to The Growth Shift, the podcast where we unlock the psychological and strategic blueprints of predictable growth. If you've built a successful business, you know the truth. Your expertise is high value, but your time is finite. The question is, how do you sustain that success without sacrificing your most valuable asset? We believe that the next level of success requires a strategic pivot, a fundamental shift that moves beyond the old ways. In every episode, we dive into the critical turning points of industry leaders and uncover how they're leveraging AI not as a shortcut, but as the strategic force for their next growth shift. Today, we dive in with a leader who is defining the future of their industry. This episode is brought to you by Valentix, your strategic growth partner. At Valentix, we believe that trust and authentic relationships are the only true currency in high-value business. We challenge the status quo by building an AI-powered client acquisition engine that enhances your human connection, helping you move beyond the slow growth of referrals. Our AI-powered systems eliminate the grind, allowing you to break through the noise, build high-value relationships, and free up your time to focus on transformative client impact. If you're ready to build a predictable growth engine, learn more at valentix.io. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today on The Growth Shift, we're joined by Jake Winters, an impact partner with Double Yolk. Jake's career is a journey of scientific rigor meeting entrepreneurial drive, spanning from early research in a lab to pioneering climate tech and ag tech startups. After helping lead a lithium-ion battery startup and helping Monarch Tractor raise $160 million in funding, Jake pivoted to Double Yolk, an early-stage consulting company that helps technical innovators build the business muscles around their products. His insights into product market fit, strategic scaling, and the practical application of AI in fast-growth environments offer a powerful blueprint for technical founders. Jake, welcome to The Growth Shift.
David, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Great to have you on the show today. Jake, your journey started in an atypical place, right? A scientific lab, and then you transitioned into product control at a lithium-ion battery startup. Definitely not where most founders start their business journeys, we could say, or most leaders start their business journeys. Jake, can you tell us a little bit about that foundational experience, where you started, and how it really led to getting into the startup world?
Absolutely, David. I started really focused on the climate side. So I've always been passionate about climate. This spans CO2 in the atmosphere all the way to electric vehicles and the different engineering pieces that happen. I was excited when I went to school. I went to Purdue University and I chose environmental geosciences as my major there. This was cool because I got to work on some very interesting problems, soil carbon, looking at how it locks up over long periods of time, and work with cool equipment, things like mass spectrometry. And I was about 2 years into running these samples, and I look around and realize there's no windows in the lab that I'm working in. And part of what drove my passion was the outdoors and being out in it, right? Enjoying it. So I knew that I was in a little bit of the wrong side of the equation. So I was sort of on the problem definition side with the research, and I made a pivot to go to more of the solution side. So working on a lithium-ion battery manufacturing line, working production control. So it was a big shift for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like it was almost a moment of irony or of ironic realization of, I got into doing this for the love of the climate and the earth and nature, and here I am locked in a box. I need to make a change pretty quick.
Yeah. Absolutely. And irony went further. Manufacturing is not a very climate-friendly exercise, right? Lots of plastic, lots of seeing how that sausage is made, too. So it really was a reality check for me, but drove a lot of my future decisions as I transitioned from that manufacturing job and running sales and operations planning on the finance piece to being pulled as the first hire at Monarch Tractor, running that for about 5 years with the co-founding team, and then ultimately transitioning to Double Yolk. So I'm happy I made the move.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like you learned some hard lessons early on there in terms of impact and purpose, right? Maybe it almost seemed like your purpose was out of alignment with your values and your identity for who you wanted to become. So it shifted the change into Monarch Tractor and onwards from there. Tell us a little bit more about that experience that you went through and how it actually helped shape you in the direction that you ultimately decided that you had to take.
Yeah, it was an interesting time for sure. And coming in and learning about how these processes actually worked. It definitely initially felt out of alignment for me, David. But what I have now seen in my career is I've steered away from a lot of these, carbon neutral or like, it's a zero emission vehicle, and you do enough like life cycle assessments looking at the emissions across everything, right? The mining of the materials all the way through the energy and the plastics that it takes to manufacture, and then the end of life of these equipment, right? What do you do with the batteries once they're done and no longer operable? It really has framed it as a gradient. For me, I think it's a 100-year problem for us to solve. It's a multi-generational piece, but we're certainly doing what we can to move as quickly as we can in the direction of climate positive technologies. And that's really what we're doing at Double Yolk.
Yeah, incredible. Before we even get to Double Yolk, there must have been some pretty pivotal experiences for you along the way. Of course, there was finding yourself in a situation where perhaps you were in an environment, in a lab, and you felt out of alignment with what you really wanted to do, and then moving further into ag tech, and perhaps also maybe feeling that way, but in a different, or having a similar experience, but in a different way. Aside from your own personal journey, going through corporate, through business, through the startup world, what do you think maybe has been the most impactful business lesson or growth shift moment that you've learned through the personal experiences, but also through your time building companies and helping them grow?
Yeah. I had the pleasure of working closely with one of the early Tesla employees. His name is Mark Schwager, and ultimately went on to run the battery startup I was at, as well as start a tractor company that I was the first hire. And from him, I learned many lessons, but one of the big ones was try to automate yourself out of a job. And this was a big piece for me, especially now when we start talking about AI. He said anything that you do more than twice, you should be looking to mechanize or automate in some way. So this was certainly relevant to me in the production control job. Lots of spreadsheets, looking at the flow of equipment and product through this manufacturing line. How do we apply labor here? And doing fairly repetitive but useful tasks, right? What are we building tomorrow? What are we building next week? How do we do and report out to folks to see how we actually affect the rest of the business, finance, and the CEO fundraising, right? It goes all the way through. So this was a really big shift for me from a mindset standpoint. I was very active in my early career, right? I'm physically going through and loading the samples and typing in spreadsheets, but the emphasis on efficiency and the human as the most valuable tool in the toolkit really was a pivotal moment for me, and I'm very thankful for his lessons.
What do you think changed for you after learning that lesson? I mean, aside from automation and efficiency, how did this reshape your understanding of and your approach to business, which ultimately led you to Double Yolk and today?
Yeah, it gave me a systems mindset, David, and it's expanded past the physical systems, right? So to your point, not just about computers and AI, but also the systems that we work with people. And so the mindset around how do I maximize the efficiency of the total system, and if there's automation opportunities for me personally, great, but really are there efficiency gains that I can do from an organization wide? I think back to running the floor, and we had a big delivery that had come up. We had to build the more modules than we had ever built in a week-long period to meet a delivery down in Southern California when I was working there. And I went through and staggered the shift schedule because we couldn't afford the overtime, the increased overtime to have everything run 24/7 like you may do in a regular manufacturing scenario. Shifted so that the labor followed the product as it went through the manufacturing line, which is not something that we had done prior to that point. And this, was a 40 or 50% efficiency gain compared to the alternative. So it's these like system level mindsets that I start to think about now in retrospect and use constantly in Double Yolk. We're looking at systems not just within the company or the client that we're working with, but also at an industry level. More and more of these things affect each other. We see it in multidisciplinary domains, and we see it now in business as well.
There's deeper insight there that I think directly ties into what you do with Double Yolk. And I mean, just by the fact that often necessity drives innovation, right? And in that example that you shared, you were able to increase productivity by 50% out of necessity because you were in a position that you hadn't been before. And for startup founders specifically, they're constantly in new situations they haven't been before, unless they're a multi-time startup founder, of course, but even new businesses bring new challenges. So it sounds like, through your understanding of systems and of processes and of people as part of that equation and the lessons that you learn, you have some pretty unique insights and experiences and perspectives you bring to your clients at Double Yolk today. Now, Jake, you refer to yourself as an impact partner with Double Yolk. What does that mean? How is it that you're working with your clients, and how are you bringing these lessons and insights in them to drive results?
Yeah, it's a question I get a lot, David. What is this impact partner thing? And it serves multiple purposes. The first is related to our North Star, which is that climate impact piece. So we're always focused, or I am always focused on how do I work with technologies and get technologies out into the world that have the greatest impact long-term on climate, human health, all of the things that we care about. But with our clients, it also plays a role, which is I come in and say, what are the areas that I can touch? It's sort of the classic 80-20 rule that have the highest impact internally at their business. And so we a lot of times get clients coming to us and asking for a certain item that we may not feel is even the most important thing to be working on. A lot of times we'll work on it. We'll knock it out of the park for sure, because this is what they've asked for. But as we learn the business, I go in and say, hey, there's this piece here that you may know about and not have time to implement, or maybe glossing over with the myriad of other things that are going on. Let's target this and see the compounding effects that come afterwards.
Do you have any real life examples that you could share with us about how you actually helped a client through this? Because from a conceptual level, this is very appealing and it makes a lot of sense. But tie those dots together for us and give us an example of this in play.
Yeah, absolutely. I had one of my old colleagues come to me. It's actually from the battery manufacturer. He set out and started his own gig and basically startup looking for seed funding and really sharp engineering talent. Previously worked at SpaceX and did all the logistics for these organizations, both SpaceX and for Romeo Power, the battery lithium-ion manufacturer that I was working with. And he came to me with a pretty clear idea of the technology he wanted to use. He understood conceptually, hey, we can run, it was a road and rail conveyance system. So imagine a truck that can drive on the road and utilize railways, and the transitions between a pretty innovative piece of technology that he already had CAD built for. So he's pretty far down the technical process. And he came and said, hey, we're looking to raise funds. Sent me the pitch deck. Kelsey, I, and the rest of the team took a look, and there was one just framing piece that we did on the narrative there that totally changed his ability to attract investment. So he was, people were conceptually interested, but they couldn't quite land on like, what is the problem that you're solving, and how does this interplay into the rest of what's going on right now? So we took what was previously a, hey, look at this cool technology that I've built, to there's a huge amount of inefficiency in the transload process, moving from the boat to the vehicle and ultimately onto the truck that takes the shipping container to its final destination, and playing into macro forces like distributed systems, a bunch of single units that operate in concert rather than a long train that is loaded for multiple weeks at a time. We elevated these pieces, which again is not necessarily that heavy of a lift, right? It didn't take us that long to build the slide deck for this, but hitting those couple of topics really resulted in landing with investors, and he was able to raise a $3.1 million. And so he now has a prototype out in the field and is rocking and rolling. So these are the little pieces, if you put your finger in the right leverage spot, that can really pay off.
Impact partner makes a whole lot more sense now, let's say, right? Because especially when you're dealing with startups, pre-funding, pre-revenue, maybe in the late stages of design even, the go-to-market effectively is almost entirely dependent on the storytelling, the value that you're driving with the product or service that you're bringing. Because if it's not connecting with investors or the market in a way that resonates with them and their values, no one's going to buy into it, right? I mean, you're probably just going to fall flat if you try to go to market with something that's a cool widget or a neat design, but doesn't actually solve a problem or provide real value and impact, right?
Totally. Totally. And there's a Venn diagram too of it needs to land with the investment community for sure, because that's the firepower that you use to drive the business and purchase the parts, especially in hardware world where we live. But then also it needs to land with your end customer, right? And a lot of it is centered around, at least in our approach, that problem solution pairing. There's a lot of solutions out there that are looking for problems. We look at problems and say, what are the solutions that actually drive these? And it's the value creation piece.
Yeah, excellent. Fantastic. Now, Jake, what you guys are doing at Double Yolk, I mean, it speaks for itself in terms of helping early stage startups and founders be able to, go to market or be able to at least connect the value of what they're doing to their go-to-market strategy, let's say. There's a lot of startups out there. There's a lot of consultants and a lot of business coaches. Regardless of the impact that you can provide, at times it can be difficult to actually connect with the right people to be able to help them ultimately. In today's crazy world, I mean, with all the competition, all the noise, all the businesses and companies that need help, what are you finding to be the most effective when it comes to connecting with the right prospective clients who are in need of your help?
Yeah. We see a lot of this, Dave. I mean, it's a more active world in startup land than it ever has been, right? To your point, it's super, super noisy. And there's a lot of people, especially at our early stage, all it takes is an idea and a website, and now you have a company and you're going to raise funds. So there is a almost service that we provide, which is filtering through these companies for the investment community as well. So we play both sides of the field in this regard, helping startups find the right investors, but also investors finding the right startups. When we look at finding these people, it's first a broad net. So we'll go to shows. We'll be at shows today. We're at shows early February, early March. I mean, we're very frequently at industry-related physical in-person conferences. And we'll go booth to booth and just get the elevator pitch from folks and use our background context, just living in the industry and seeing and understanding the problem side of the equation to say, is that something that could be meaningful, right? It may not solve the problem today, but does it have the opportunity to? This is usually followed up by some sort of online outreach. So LinkedIn's a powerful tool for sure. And when we see people online that are chatting about what they're doing or potentially even chatting about problems that they have, we try to connect the dots there. And then we become the liaison and help support kind of the shuffleboard between folks that have problems and folks that may have solutions for them.
No, I love this approach. Today getting in front of people is vital. There's just so much going on that the best way to actually have a conversation is face to face with somebody. But the approach that you take, I mean, people, especially entrepreneurs and business owners, love talking about themselves and what they do. So it's easy to get into a conversation with them. But how to build the additional value is to show them that you truly understand them. Not just that you're listening, but you identify and understand the problems that they have, perhaps in ways that no one else does. Not just the problems, but the product as well, the impact that they want to have. So I love the approach that you guys are taking about getting in front of people, having meaningful conversations, and showing them that you understand them. Makes it very memorable for them. So I imagine that future outreach and relationship building is a lot more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. It's paving the road before you walk on it for sure. And you bring up an interesting point, David, demonstrating that you know what they're going through. We've been through the startup gauntlet several times, right? Myself with the battery and tractor gig, and then Kelsey, founder of Double Yolk, with several early stage startups, including being the first hire there. So we've seen the full journey. And a lot of times it's simple things like being able to speak the lingo and ask questions about problems that we had during that stage. So definitely rely on your past experience. And if not, reach out and use some of the tools, right? I mean, ChatGPT has the basic knowledge of any of these stages. And so you can get a flavor, a proxy for even startup world, if that's something you're looking to enter, through these kind of tools. And certainly I would say through diffusion of being in person with people like us and people like CEOs that are running startups.
Yeah, definitely. And with Double Yolk being in the earlier years itself, I mean, as you know, and have experience in the startup world, you have to be constantly testing and trying new things. Even if you find one that works, there's a dozen more that could potentially be more valuable, right? So when we look at the things that you're testing when it comes to client acquisition and the challenges that you're up against to find more avenues that will really provide you or put you in a position where you can provide the value and make those connections. Where are you finding and observing maybe some of the biggest challenges when it comes to diversifying your client acquisition approaches?
Yeah, there are a couple of challenges that we see in our space. Certainly, we love ag tech and climate tech. These are really our like bread and butter industries. But there is a certain point where you're working with so many folks in ag tech or in climate tech that there are competitive angles where there's companies that you could help, but maybe they feel, even if it's not necessarily true, they're competitive with a current client. So this is a challenge piece for sure. We also are looking at how do we expand into other industries and kind of break into these areas like space and the space industry, launch, payload, some of these areas that I'm personally passionate about and that we're seeing significant growth in. And this is a difficult space to break into, no pun intended. Technical lever, the level of technical expertise that these people work with, especially in like an aerospace application, is pretty significant. So we went out and said, who can we chat with to help bring us up to that level and start adding value, maybe in an area that we know well. So we actually recently landed a client that works on a lot of the battery systems for space applications and a variety of applications, but certainly space. And so being able to apply our battery expertise in this new domain has now kind of cracked the door open so that we have a reason to reach out to folks that maybe we wouldn't have had as much relevance for in the past. So it's sort of that stepping stone approach, David, of how do you use what you have today? Because there are opportunities for, we come back to value creation every single time. There's opportunities for value creation across the network of people that you're working with, probably, especially if you're industry focused like we are.
This is, again, I think this is very deeply insightful for the audience. And I think they probably missed what I mean about being the most important. What I mean is the most important part of this. You mentioned that as a stepping stone, right? Getting into having a conversation with, within the space industry, let's call it, based off of one specific thing, somewhere you have experience, a single point of penetration, right? You have a very broad set of experience and expertise that can translate across industries. And a lot of people today are trying to brand themselves as generalists. Oh, I'm better because I can do so many different things. You're not going to have any success breaking into a new market as a generalist, right? But if you can find that single point of penetration, somewhere that you have high expertise, and you can demonstrate that you can solve a very specific, precise problem, that's the stepping stone that gets you in the door, that allows you to build trust, and then you can go broad from there. So client acquisition needs to be very targeted, very precise, and very specific. And it's through that you can earn the trust to start branching out, whether it's into new industries or into broader services with a client that you're working with. So I love the approach that you guys are taking to start breaking into new industries. Very, very good.
Couldn't agree with you more, David. Yeah, find the discrete problem, solve it for them, and then you get to expand into some of these other areas where you might even be able to provide more value.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Tell us a little bit more then, if we're shifting gears here then. Tell us a little bit about AI, right? You have a technical background. Heck, you're a scientist. You're an extremely intelligent guy. Where does AI start to come into play for you at Double Yolk to allow you to create more of an impact with the clients that you're serving?
Yeah, thanks for the kind words, David. We certainly are AI enabled at Double Yolk, and we've been early on many of the tools. So, when ChatGPT and Claude early days came out, we were in it and really just started to play around with it. Like, hey, what can this tool do? What's it capable of? It took a couple of months, but we began to see value internally at Double Yolk. And this is through a couple of means. One is we use it across the team. So we have shared project folders through ChatGPT for each client that allow us to have that shared kind of context and knowledge base, even if it's not coming directly from myself or from Kelsey. So we're able to scale the impact of our executive team through a lot of our support staff by leveraging these tools as like a central repository of information that you can query with natural language. So this is certainly a great piece. Another area that we're leveraging, AI is a gradient, right? And so, AI sort of has been around for a while, but we see this latest wave with a lot of the LLMs and things. We have data is kind of the foundational piece. So we have this data collection tool, which is essentially grabbing a transcript of conversations that we have internally or externally, as long as folks are okay being recorded. We grab this data, and what it allows us to do is bring exact words and phrases. We talked about how a lot of what we're doing is storytelling, narrative. How do you communicate the value? We can take the words and phrases that allow us to speak the language of our clients on behalf of our clients for things like social development or any sort of content creation, and for those pitch decks, anything that is related to the communication of the core idea. And I go back and reference the source of truth, right? I don't have to remember what the client said or my interpretation of the words that they said. I can go back and actually grab the sentence that they said and said, this is the way that we communicate this, and this is what lands. Because we are certainly informed and understand a lot of the clients in the ag tech, climate tech space, grow farmers, ranchers, and consumers that are on the other ends of EV purchases, but we don't know every single depth and nuance of these. So relying on the expertise of the client and partnering with them in this way is part of how we're leveraging the AI tools.
That's incredible. And I mean, this is an excellent use case that everyone's using, right? Taking notes and using these AI note takers, but it's what's behind it that's more important, right? It's the ability to be more precise with what you're doing, the ability to take time and engage with the person you're speaking with and not have to worry about taking notes, thus enhancing effectiveness, efficiency, and precision with everything that you're doing. This is a small use case, but one that I think everyone should be using AI for today. Jake, you are well versed in efficiency, and this is the least of how you're using AI, of course. But when we look at efficiency for businesses and startups today as a whole, with AI being considered, what do you think are the biggest risks and maybe opportunities as well for early stage companies integrating AI for efficiency? And perhaps what I mean by risks is putting themselves in a position where what they're doing is a distraction rather than a benefit.
Yeah, there's definitely shiny object syndrome in all of the AI space right now, David, and I fall victim to this myself. It's easy to get excited about a tool and think about what it may or may not be able to do, even in the immediate future. Going back to the foundational piece, if I said it in one line, would be if you can't bill for it, then it's not valuable. Like if it's not advancing your deliverable that you can put on a line item on your invoice and say, this is what we created for you and delivered for you this month, it's probably not creating value. That said, it doesn't mean that it can't create value or that it won't create value in the future. So there's kind of like this half in, half out, where we try to stay up to speed on what's going on, try the tools, make sure that we have an awareness of the full set of capabilities. And this is a challenge in and of itself. The stuff is coming so fast that it's hard to even know what's out there. But trying it and then seeing how you can apply it. Can you actually create it and advance a deliverable, even if it's just compressing the amount of time that it takes to deliver that? This is how we think about staying focused, because I am as guilty as anybody else of going off the rails and getting distracted by tools.
AI can be profoundly impactful, it can be very distracting, but at the end of the day, it's only going to continue improving. And as long as you're spending the right amount of time with the right focus on the right things, all will come together, let's say, and those shiny objects hopefully will clear themselves. Jake, there's something I wanted to ask you just about your thoughts and your observations on the sustainability of AI. Right, because obviously you are passionate about sustainability, about the environment, about Mother Nature, we could say. You mentioned earlier that you were deeply involved with, and we could say even completely enthralled with sustainability by way of electronic vehicles and all things like this. But you realize as well that it's not a problem to be solved in the next 10 years. It's a problem to be solved in the next 100 when it comes to manufacturing and resources and all of these things as well. Where I'm going here is that today AI is costing a lot, in terms of sustainability, the water consumption, the energy, manufacturing of data centers and all of this as well. What are your general thoughts on how these problems might be addressed or solved in the coming years?
Yeah, it's a really good question, David. And I have a unique take on this, I think. Really, yes, super passionate about our ability to decarbonize wherever possible. At the same time, I consider myself an energy maximalist. And what I mean by that is you look at any economy over any period of time, and you can basically draw a one-to-one relationship between the amount of energy that they control through whatever source to the GDP of that economy. And so energy is really the driver, right? It's the substitution for human work. We're not out in the field like running a hoe, right? You're using a diesel tractor and the diesel to offset the humans so that they can do more valuable things. So I think we need to move forward as fast as possible. So I think we should not say that we should slow down or limit in any way the progression of technology by sake of let's do it more sustainably. That said, I think we also should not limit and push as hard as possible to say what are the physical boundaries that allow us to create these energy sources, access this energy really in ways that are low emission or hopefully negative emission. There are technologies that we work with. Arbor Energy down south in Southern California is a carbon fixing technology. So think about it as like a carbon capture technology that is a net positive producer energy. They produce hydrogen as their byproduct, which then you can burn and run a turbine creating energy. And nuclear, anything at a fundamental particle standpoint, these things are high point sources of pollution, right? You have these outputs that are very toxic, but are manageable. We're very bullish and supportive of these kind of technologies as well. So I'm not sure if I've totally answered your question, but this is the way that we think about progressing the ball down the field while still being conscious that we live in a system that is supported by all of these things that we negatively impact through carbon and some of the other pollution.
So AI right now and you know what we're going through this transformation, it's definitely creating more carbon initially, right? But because of the efficiency and the growth that we'll see with it, I'm sure the hope there is that, you know, with the greater output, with the greater computing power, with more people being freed up to focus on bigger problems and bigger solutions, we'll be able to now more quickly engineer or discover effective solutions to address the problem.
Totally. I think material science is going to be a fixed point that really drives this thing forward, David. So once we get to the point where these AI systems can help us, and they already are, more quickly validate materials and some of these complex natures that have really interesting properties for these applications, it could be as simple as better batteries or better motors, more of a catalyst for energy release in an operation. All of these things I think will compound, but we need the intention behind it. So yeah, it's absolutely, I think, a positive that we're moving forward with some of the AI stuff and, you know, very optimistic about where we're going.
Couldn't agree more. Jake, your story covers scientific rigor, entrepreneurial pivots, and a deep commitment to impact. For the founders, the coaches, and the growth-minded listeners who are navigating their own growth shift, what's the single most important piece of advice that you would leave them with about embracing challenges and building a truly impactful business?
I think I'd leave them with the phrase that I've been using, which is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So you overestimate what you can do in a day or a week, but underestimate what you can do in a year. This is something I think about pretty much every morning when I wake up. I'm rearing to go, right? I'm ready to just tackle it. And I've fallen into the trap in a past life of just burning myself out too quickly and then not seeing the progression, the sustained value creation over a long term. So being intentional, focusing on those 80-20 places that you can push and have the greatest impact, and thinking about how do I incrementally move this forward day on day. Nothing's going to happen in a 24 or 48 hour period. It's the slowest smooth, smoothest fast.
Jake, thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights with the audience today. For anyone listening who might like to learn more about Double Yolk or maybe to just connect with you for a conversation, what would be the best way to find you?
Yeah, you can find us online. We're at dblyolk.com, and I'm on LinkedIn, pretty active there. So Jake Winters 1, I think, is my URL. So please reach out. We're all about collaboration. So it's a human-to-human activity, and we're all about creating value. So if you're interested in creating value, let us know.
Thanks again for joining us today on The Growth Shift.
Thanks for having me.
Another powerful conversation on The Growth Shift. If you, like our guests, are ready to turn your expertise into a predictable, scalable growth engine, one that eliminates the grind of prospecting and enhances your high-value relationships, then it's time to connect with Valentix. We are not a marketing agency. We are your strategic growth partner, building intelligent systems that ensure your client acquisition is predictable, not dependent on chance. To see how our AI-powered frameworks can free up your time and fill your calendar with decision makers, visit valentix.io. Thank you for joining us on The Growth Shift. We'll see you next time.